Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. This week we will be talking about how a game engine called Godot was exploited to distribute malware across multiple platforms: Windows, Linux, macOS, iOS, Android, and potentially even consoles like PlayStations, Nintendo Switches, and Xboxes. Godot engine is a game-building engine that allows developers to build games for all the platforms I just mentioned. It was actually used to make two games I quite enjoy, which are called Brotato and Domekeeper. Godot supports many programming languages, including C#, C++, Rust, NIM, Python, and JavaScript, so developers can use what they're comfortable with. Godot notably also has its own simple scripting language called GDScript, made specifically for integration with the engine. The language was also leveraged by attackers to execute arbitrary code, and, importantly, bypass antivirus detection on systems. A game engine may seem like an unexpected way to deploy malicious code, but if you think about it, the flexibility in types of devices you could infect is a major advantage, as well as the simplicity of the scripting language GDScript for attackers who may be less experienced in advanced programming. Malware developed using the GDScript has been called Godloader malware, and is associated with the threat actors Stargazer Goblin, which have a malware distribution as a service network called the Stargazer's Ghost Network. As you can probably guess, this network is used to distribute malware, and they've used GitHub repositories to do this in the past, but this method may be a lot easier and a lot wider of a scope. So how does this work? It's pretty simple. The attacker writes malicious code in the GD scripting language with the GameEngine.pck files. These files are usually used to package assets for games, like visual sprites and character models that will load when a game is being run. Of course, if these files are loaded, it triggers the malicious code that was written by the attacker. This code can be a lot of different things. Some of the known attacks have included credential stealing for accounts saved on the device, using it as a foothold to install other malware backdoors into the system, and in one case, even a crypto miner was installed. Part of the danger of using Godot is that it's often not detected by traditional antivirus or websites like VirusTotal, where you can upload files to check for malware. Part of this is because it's a newer technique. Part of this is because it's rather hard to detect. Game package files are usually not malicious inherently, and so, for an antivirus, they shouldn't usually raise any red flags. This difficult-to-detect nature has led to an estimated 17,000 infections since June 29, 2024. Godot claims that most of the affected users were downloading cracks or pirated versions of paid video games, not legitimate games. So, if you buy games through an official marketplace like Steam or any console-specific game stores, you should be all good. The only issue would be if the game developers themselves were compromised and the attackers edited legitimate game files. And don't get me wrong, that is still definitely possible, but it's not really where we're seeing most of these cases coming from. With pirated copies of games, this may be cliche, but you never really know who you can trust. Legitimate cracked free versions of games do exist out there, somewhere on the internet, but there is a gamble between those versions and maybe some that come with some bonus malware. Keep in mind, this is not actually a vulnerability within Godot itself. Anywhere there is a programming language, that language can be exploited to write malware. There's really no exceptions to this, and game engines are no different. There's not really a ton Godot can do from their end to prevent attackers from exploiting their code, besides removing the accounts of known threat actors. But even then, this malicious code can be uploaded elsewhere on the internet for download, such as those piracy sites, and that's really out of control for Godot to take care of. So what can you do to avoid infection from a video game? And the easy answer is don't download pirated copies of games. Unfortunately, there are some games out there that are really hard to play without pirating them or emulating them in some form, because the developers just didn't keep them up, never ported them to PC, or they're just no longer supported on new devices. I'm not going to be the copyright police and say whether you should or should not pirate things, but just keep in mind there is always a risk of some sort of malware if you choose to do so. There are, of course, precautions you can take to avoid malware, but maybe at least avoid things made with the Godot engine for now until we get better detection technologies up to date. Thank you to Checkpoint Security, the Hacker News, Bleepy Computer, Info Security Magazine for information on these attacks. It was really interesting to read about. And of course, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, and until next time, stay secure.